recently somebody sent me an email with a really, really great message. And that message is this. Hi there, Julie. I feel like I'm stuck in my current work and life. And I'm writing to ask if long distance energy healing is a thing. Is it real? Is it true? Or is it just a scam? Thank you for letting me know. With love, William. So I have
Great question.
I have the perfect guest to respond to that question. My guest is my dear friend Diane Goldner, who I've known for, gosh, I don't know, 20 some years, I think now. And she's a real expert in the field of healing, long distance and, hands-on in-person healing. And so I've invited her back so that we can dive in to this meaty question of, is it really a thing? And is it true? So Diane, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to have you join me again on Talking True.
I am so glad to be here. And this is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. So I'm laughing because I have so much I want to share about this. So the first thing I want to say is I used to be an investigative reporter. So I stumbled upon healing as a reporter. And I want to say, I remember when people would tell me they could do a long distance healing. And I thought, yeah, and I've got a bridge to sell you. Because I just thought that is just the most ridiculous thing. How could that ever, I thought, okay, you're pulling my leg. This is a pull too far. But it turns out it really is not only real, it is incredibly powerful. So, I'll just share once. I mean, this is a long, long time ago. I was working on my book. I was living in New York. I was in LA on assignment for both the magazine I was working for and for my book. And I got a horrific migraine headache. And I called one of the healers I knew because I thought, God knows, maybe somehow they could help me. They weren't even home. But a short while later, I could feel this incredible energy running through my whole body. It was like a miracle. It was like bliss and grace going through my body. And my headache went away, of course. I fell asleep. I woke up, my headache was gone. And this was one of my first experiences of long distance healing. So, of course, after that, when I knew somebody had done something because it was so palpable and strong. And that is one of the things I want to say, when I do a healing, I'm long distance. I could be in LA, somebody could be in New York. Honestly, somebody could be on Mars. It doesn't really matter. So I've done long distance healings with people pretty much probably on every continent except Antarctica, maybe. And not everybody, but the thing is people can feel me. So I remember once I was working with a retired CEO. And, we were working on this and that. And then I was out of town and he had some kind of emergency. And I said, let me do a healing. And he was like, well, okay. So of course he didn't believe in long distance healing. Who would, right? And when I finished the healing and I called him, he was like, oh my God, Diane, it was just like I was on your table. He was in shock. And I understand that feeling. So anyway, that's just an introduction. So it's really trippy that you can feel somebody from across the country when they're doing a healing. It's just like really mind-boggling. And of course, it opens up a lot of questions, doesn't it?
Yes, for sure it does. So I guess one of the questions I would ask is, how could you even train to do that?
Yes. Okay. So we'll start with my training. I now teach. I probably am one of the only people that I know of who I specialize in teaching long distance healing. And it really started during COVID. Maybe before, but I mean, COVID is when it really took off because we couldn't get together in person and my students wanted to continue. But anyway, how do you learn? So when I was learning long distance healing, first I was learning hands-on healing, right? And then one of the women that I had interviewed for my book, who I'd become friendly with, and who, my friend Gerda, who really became not only a friend, but a mentor, and challenged me at every step of the way. She was like, why don't you do a long distance healing for me? I was like, I couldn't do that. It's like, are you kidding me? She said, well, why don't you just try? If you can't do it, what's the harm in trying? So I did the healing. And I was so flustered afterward. And I was like, Gerda, I didn't really get anything. And she said, really? Are you sure? And I said, well, I just had this came through and that came through. And she said, that's exactly what I'm working on right now. And I was just floored. So that was the beginning of my training. So one of the things is learning to trust, because you're working at a very high level and with what we might call subtle information. But of course, when we say subtle, sometimes it's not sometimes, subtle can be much more powerful than somebody yelling and screaming, right? Sometimes you can whisper something in, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, there's
So,
a lot more to it when I teach people. We go through a really deep process of connecting to your energy centers, learning to work with them, learning to experience what your energy feels like. And then slowly, when you bring somebody else in, you can start to perceive how it changes your energy field. That's one thing.
mhm. So there's really no limits in terms of who you can work with and how you can work with them, right? Is what you're
Right.
saying.
Right. Um, yeah, I'm laughing. You know what? Very early on, I want to be really discreet here. Um, I was doing a healing for somebody, a current boss, magazine person, and somebody I used to work with came in. And I was very inexperienced. And I was like, well, he didn't ask, I haven't asked for permission. I can't really do a healing for him. But he was so insistent. I finally had to give my attention to this person and offer light and peace and harmony, whatever it was. And a few days later, I picked up the paper, and this person was involved in a very big situation. I don't want to get into any more detail than that, but it made it into the papers, and it was obviously something he was very stressed about. And he was calling out for help, and I would guess I was the one that got dispatched.
Wow,
So,
that's quite,
yeah.
quite something. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know you've had that experience where somebody comes to you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Either I can feel them in my own, and I think it's true of everybody actually. It's just maybe that most people don't pay attention, and it can be as simple as having an impulse or a prompt to call somebody just to check in on them to see how they're doing and all of those things, because that is really a message from your higher self and their higher self communicating, and I'm guessing that that's kind of the mechanics, so to speak, of how the beginning part of doing long distance healing works, right? Connect
Yes.
at that level.
Yes, I mean, the beginning of a heal. I mean, do you want to talk about how I actually connect, or is that
Yes,
I have
yeah,
so
I
many
think
different things that I would like to talk about. So in the very beginning, first I run through all my energy centers. I do an invocation. I bring in whatever spiritual support feels appropriate. And then I call in the other person and their higher self. And we're basically meeting on a dimension beyond time and space. And these dimensions are real. I mean, we're laughing, but they're more real than the physical dimension. To me,
yes.
what's happening on this level is more significant. And and I want to say that, we talk about it as the spiritual realm. My own theory, and I know some scientists, some really brilliant scientists who concur with this. It's another word would be the quantum dimension. So what's happening in what we call quantum physics is a dimension, and it's connected to the spiritual dimension. But anyway, so I connect in, and then I set the intention for the healing, whatever the person, we've talked before that I start the actual transmission. And my own way of working is almost emerging. I would say that I bring that person in so close, they're like overlaid on my energy field. So I can experience my energy and their energy. And it's so intense, I'll feel things in my own body. And then we'll go from there. And the thing that enables me to do a long distance healing is that merging. So I'm both my independent self, but I've become one. We've become one with each other. So I'm not doing a healing. I'm inviting that person to resonate with the vibration that they need. So if they're in fear, it might be releasing fear. I'll give you an example. This was one of the most dramatic cases to this date that I've ever done. So it involved a boy, maybe he was 8 or 9, who was playing hide and seek on the roof of the 3rd-story building. And he fell off the roof. And I got a phone call, not from his mother, but from a neighbor, who asked me if I would do a healing for this boy, that they didn't know if he would make it. And she said, you can't even go to the hospital. I was like, that's not a problem for me. She said, he's so fragile, they won't let anybody in his room other than the parents. I said, fine. I said, I'm going to start right now. And I went in, and, when they found him, he had blood coming out of his ear, and he was, of course, unconscious, and he had a broken pelvis. And I went in. This was a very difficult healing. They're often full of joy, but this was really challenging. He was in such a state of fear. And so I had to hold that state, be present with that. And it took me probably over an hour to calm him down, just to calm him down. And when he was in that frozen fear, he was frozen. His energy was literally frozen. When they say frozen in fear, it's literal. And then I touched his head. Now, mind you, this is long distance. I touched his head, and he went back into that state of fear because his head was in so much pain. And I had to calm him down all over again. And then I was able to work on his head. And then I went to work on his pelvis because he had broken his pelvis too. And I was told that I didn't need to do that. And I probably did a follow-up healing, and that boy walked out of the hospital 6 weeks later, just fine.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I wouldn't even say, I saved his life. All I would say is that if I hadn't been able to bring him out of that state of fear, he would not have been able to heal. So it was a very important, and, there aren't that many. Sometimes you have to work on that higher level to do that kind of work for somebody. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like I'm talking and talking.
No. It's great. It's really helpful because, everything you've shared is actually the way I work as well.
I know.
Doing readings, when I'm doing readings or helping somebody with, shadow work and whatever, because I connect in. And then it's almost like there's a merging that takes place. And so I'm essentially reading that information as if I'm reading my very own self and what's happening inside myself and inside the psyche and the emotions and so on and so forth. Because there's kind of no distance, that the idea of separation isn't there anymore. And it's so intimate and so immediate and so easy to speak to, that it's just kind of like second nature. So it's essentially the same kind of work.
Yes.
and it does work. I mean, as we both had, endless evidence of that over the last, I don't know how many
Oh
decades.
yeah. No, it's
Right.
incredible. And that
So,
and that union is a really joyful experience, even when somebody's in a difficult state. There's still a lot of joy and bliss. So even with that boy, where I really had to, I mean, steel myself in a sense because it was so intense. But still there was connection, and maybe I just knew if I just was patient, he would eventually come into complete union.
mhm, yes, and also what happens is, and maybe it's a bit more difficult with a child, but certainly with another adult, when you can speak to what you're seeing in terms of the condition, whether it's emotional, psychological, physical, or whatever, the client that you're working with, their capacity to resonate and see that and know that to be true for themselves is really, really what does the work more than anything, right?
Yeah.
Because they become their own inner physicians, or they recognize their own inner physician, so to
Well,
speak.
you communicate what you see directly. And I do too. After I do that long distance transmission, normally I would tell somebody what I experienced. And in this case, I did send a message through the neighbor that this child was going to be extremely agitated.
Mm-hmm.
And not to worry, because they were gonna, whatever I had experienced in the healing was gonna have to play out for. So and that's exactly what happened when he started coming out of a coma. But what I was going to say is a lot of the time I'm communicating directly to the other person's higher self.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like in the case of that boy, I don't, not everything gets communicated at the personality level. I think
Mm-hmm.
when you do those readings, which are so amazing, you convey it all in so much detail. It's just the most wonderful experience. Because I've had readings with you. And so a lot of times I'll tell a person it's going to take about a week for the healing to unfold. And what I'm saying is usually the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I do a healing, I'm showing them a new energy. I know you are too when you speak and talk to them, and maybe energetically also.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's whether they can hold it, absorb it and hold it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you get, as coming back to the email I got
Yeah.
just yesterday, actually, which is great timing, that with respect to somebody who feels like he or she is stuck in their working life, for example, or, not
Yeah.
able to live on purpose or whatever the story is, do you get many clients that ask for help with that?
I do. I get all, everything you can imagine. I think I've worked with people on all kind, I mean, even business deals. Everything is energy,
Mm.
and everything, as you know, and everything that we experience is because of the way our energy is. And as soon as this is the crazy part, right? As soon as you change your energy, the whole world changes.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, it's kind of, the way I often put it is it's like when you fall in love, when you really fall deeply in love, it's like everywhere you look and everyone you look at, you just feel this love
Beautiful,
for,
right?
right?
Yeah. So, I've worked with I worked with one woman who would get upset, and as she would say, she couldn't hold her pole steady. You understand that though intuitively, right? She
Yes,
just
yes.
couldn't stay steady. Most she would get all, like this inside emotionally. Um and So, I'm just, that's one thing that's coming up. But yes, I work on all kinds of things. I actually think in some ways, well, not in some ways, in all ways, this is probably, listen, when you're in pain, you want to get out of pain. So when
Yes.
people call me and they're having a physical problem, I mean, my heart goes out to anyone. But almost always there are underlying patterns, emotional patterns, belief patterns,
Hmm.
and confusions about alignment, spiritually. So when I'm healing the physical, I'm healing these other levels. Almost, not always, not in every case, but almost always. Like the example of that little boy, it wasn't really, why were you up on the roof? It was just helping him in that
Hmm.
physical, what he needed. Uh,
Hmm.
but a lot of, I'd say 95% of the time, it's more than that. It's more than the physical thing somebody is presenting to me. And some people are wise enough to call me without a physical issue.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, like me, I've worked with people who, for example, have had chronic conditions. Let's say, lower back problem that just is not getting any better no matter what they do. And I start looking and working with them, and I go, oh my God, it's because they're stuck in this just god awful relationship where they're really, really unhappy, or in a work situation where they don't feel valued, or whatever the story is
Yeah.
around that. Because it's the physical body expressing their frustration, and not being able to maybe see it, or have the courage to change it. And I'm guessing you've got anecdotes around that, right?
Oh my God, it happens all the time. I mean, I remember, I mean, this is years ago. This gentleman came in, his back was so seized up, in pain. I mean, he was just in horrific pain. And it was just so clear to me as soon as we started talking that, his, he'd spent the weekend cleaning out his mother-in-law's country house or something. And he said she was so rude to him, as always. That pain in his back was really his anger, you
Hmm.
know, at being treated that way and not standing up for himself. And as soon as we touched on that, it released, he was fine the next day. So that's one example. There are so many other examples. A woman came in to see me. She couldn't, her hands were atrophying. She couldn't open jars. I mean, she was in her early 50s and she couldn't open a jar. And of course, the doctors, didn't know why and didn't have any idea what to do. It was just something she was going to have to live with. And a friend of hers said, why don't you, go see Diane and see what she can do? And, sometimes there's a precipitating event. I'm sure you find this too.
Hmm.
And I said to her, yeah, I said, did anything happen? Like maybe in the year or two before your hands started, atrophying? And she said, no. And then it was like a light bulb went off. It was like, one of those things in a cartoon, you know what I mean? She said,
Hmm.
oh my God. She said, my husband had a skydiving accident. So she had seen her husband parachuting and the parachute didn't open or
Oh.
didn't open completely. I know it was horrific, right? And he did survive. Maybe he got caught in the treetops and whatever. He did survive, but it took like about a year for him to recover
Hmm.
from his injuries. And so I still didn't know what the answer exactly was, but I started running energy into her hands, and I cannot make this stuff up. So as soon as I started, you probably have already guessed this, but I heard that she just the idea of him dying was more than she can handle.
Yes. Wow.
And yeah, so all the time our bodies are talking to us. And unfortunately, when we don't listen, it escalates. It goes from a whisper to like a a little louder and then it gets
Yes,
louder.
yes.
I'm laughing because I've had that experience myself when you just can't handle what you have to do. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, I remember I shared this in one of my books actually, but I remember, oh, I don't know how many years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, I started to get this severe, severe pain in my shoulder and didn't know what it was. And then found out, and I went to the doctors and so on, ran some tests, that it was frozen shoulder. And and of course, I was long in the practice of inquiring, what is this here to show me? And of course, it was so obvious. It was, I was carrying a lot of weight work-wise on my shoulders
Yeah.
and was exhausted. So anyway, what happened was I cleared that, the right shoulder, and then I think 6 months later, I got the same in the left shoulder, and so I realized I think there's still some more work to be done around that because I didn't want
And
to go.
that's when you're working on it. When you don't work on it, that's when you really can run
Yeah.
into trouble, or when you're working on it and you can't solve it. And I say that with, I've been there, where you're working on it, and you just, whatever it is that you are being called to do, you just can't, you're just not ready to do it. And,
Mhm. Yeah. Yes. Or you take it so far, but the last little part you're not seeing, or you're not quite
yeah,
knowing what to do
yeah,
as
yeah,
well. It can be quite subtle. But I just, even when I have a headache, or if I cut my finger or whatever it is, I just always inquire, what is this here to show me? What am I supposed to learn? I've just been in the habit of doing that because it somehow circumvents, a bigger thing happening, or it kind of speeds up the healing process. Even if I have to go to the doctors, to see a doctor, I'll still inquire. And
yeah.
thankfully, I've had great doctors who will just kind of often speak as well to that and use that language, which is very unusual.
Unusual. It'd be nice if
Yeah.
there were more doctors who did that.
Yeah, because I remember some years ago when I lived on Grand Bahama and I had a UTI, I went to my little Polish doctor. She was really direct, very frank. And she said, "What's pissing you off?" And I just started to laugh. I just couldn't stop laughing because she was so on point, And
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's the Polish way, to kind of also speak to the energy behind
No,
stuff.
I think that's an enlightened doctor.
Yes. So
Because
anyway,
I think most of them are, God bless them, they do wonderful things, with the physical body, but I don't think they're connecting it in most cases. It's not like one of the courses you take in medical school yet.
no,
Maybe
not yet.
in the future, maybe it will be.
Yeah, let's hope so. But
Yeah,
I think, if you practice just doing that whenever there's any sort of condition, or an emotional upset,
yeah,
or feeling stressed, or whatever it is, it really does help alleviate it, and it really brings very rapid results,
yes,
really quickly, for sure. Yeah. So in terms of I'd like to ask about your training, just in case any viewers are
sure.
interested in joining you for any of your online training to become a
Yeah.
healer or to learn about healing. How does that work?
Now I do it on Zoom. So I have a very international, I mean, I'd say more people are in the US, but I have an international student body. So I've had, classes where someone's in Europe, somebody's in India, somebody is in Australia, and everyone else is in the US. Time zones are really challenging then,
Mm,
because you're sometimes, whatever.
yes, yes.
Um, so the first thing I like to teach is something called Awakening Your Light Body. And I love this class because it really connects people to their own energy centers. And it is an awakening because we all have things in our energy. And as you're going through that process, you start to realize how much your energy and your life and your body are one. It's really, and it's a really deep and intimate course because of this. I'm not just teaching a skill set, where everybody's opening up and
Mhm.
coming to a new understanding of who they are and how the world works. And it's just, that's so incredible. And then whoever wants to, I teach an advanced course, what I call the graduate level, where we're working with different frequencies that are really building blocks of consciousness. And in both classes, I start teaching how to, harmonize somebody else's energy, how to do a healing, how to soul link. And then when we get to the graduate level, we're really working with these patterns of energy and light. And it's really, placing radiance into people or situations. And then at the end of that, if people want to continue, and throughout that process, people are still working on their own, pretty much their own domain, I would say, their own life.
Mm-hmm.
We start sprinkling more of working on other people as we go along. And then I teach, long distance healing after that whole process. I mean, I'm teaching it all along, but then we just do long distance healings. So we'll either work on each other, people in the group, or people somebody knows, or some situation where we feel, and I guide them through that whole healing process. And then we all discuss what each person experienced. So they get very hands-on, quote, hands-on
Yes.
feedback and guidance for a very long period of time in terms of my training. And I hope soon to do another hands-on healing class, because that's a wonderful thing to do too. And the more hands-on healing work you do, the more you can bring that into your distance healing. Like I almost, it's almost the same for me, whether I'm hands-on literally or hands-on distance. And then I'm teaching classes. I have a healing 101 and a chakra class. Alison Dubois, a friend of mine, launched a new university, a psychic university. And so I have a few classes there too. And those are wonderful also. And we dive right into hands-on healing at the end of the first class. We're on a video where I show people some techniques.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you find when people do their training with you that they have these kind of huge shifts and epiphanies and realizations that, it's clear to them that they're picking up and seeing things that they probably wouldn't have known before or recognized before,
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I come back and people are in a completely, I mean, not everyone becomes a healer, but hangs out their
Mm-hmm.
shingle and becomes a
Mm-hmm.
healer. But, I mean, definitely some of my students have become healers in their actual day-to-day profession. Others are using it. I had one person who was a lawyer whose partners started asking him to go home and meditate when they had a
Wow.
challenge because they knew he would solve it.
Wow.
They didn't know exactly what he was doing, that, he was
Right.
doing healing long distance. And so, you can use, this is the other thing about that, with distance work, right? When you're hands-on, you're hands-on. That's the modality, right? And you're working specifically on whatever that person's issues are. When you're doing distance work, you can work on just about anything, um,
Yes.
like, I mean, I could do that hands-on too, if, I mean, somebody came to me and said, I'm having trouble, closing this deal, I would do a healing about that and work on it
Yeah.
hands-on or distance.
So,
So
and do you help people like with financial flow or with relationships and
I do all of that. And I've gone through phases where, oh, this is my favorite thing. Oh no, that's my favorite
yes,
thing
yes,
for a long time. And I'm actually kind of toying with writing a new book about relationships. But um, yes, because where to begin? 9 times out of 10, when somebody is having a problem physically, it's a relationship issue. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about?
Oh, yes, 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 yes,
It's
yes.
just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes.
So,
Either that, either a relationship issue or
or,
a loneliness issue, and wanting to find
yeah,
someone,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
feeling thwarted or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love working on business issues. I have one client who is actually the CEO. I'm not going to say of what kind of company. And but I've worked on different board of director meetings and things like that. And this client has told me that the only time it didn't go well was when this person didn't ask me to do a healing before the meeting.
Wow.
And this is big um venture. Let's just call it a venture, you know. I don't want to be too descriptive and, so yeah, so you can work on anything as energy. And usually it's something in our own psyche that's blocking, that is creating the block.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, years ago, I hate to say this, but years ago, when I was first receiving healings, it was like experiment. I was using myself as a guinea pig. And I had a breakup and it occurred to me that what did all these people have in common? And the answer was the people I had dated. And the answer was me. When you keep, and I call it like a groove, like in a record, when you have a skip on a record and every time you hit that same place, and
Yes.
most people have that in their life.
Yes.
And it can be healed. That's the good news.
Yeah, because a lot of that too, in many cases, is just stuff that patterns and conditioning we've inherited unconsciously, for the most part, especially around, and I can speak from experience, around financial issues, because, in my when I was growing up in my family, we had a father that was always saying, it's hard to make a decent living and money's hard
Money
to come
doesn't
by.
grow on trees, right?
Yeah, yes. So because you take that on and internalize it, and then it becomes a truth for you because you believe that, right? So obviously what
Yeah.
you believe manifests.
Yeah.
And all of that can be very subtle and
Or
unconscious.
not, or not
Or
unconscious
not.
yet, but not so subtle, right?
Yes, yes.
But I
And
think it's true with the relationship patterns too.
mhm, yes. Yeah, especially if you had parents who were always fighting, or there was divorce, or you're hearing your mother speak badly about your father because he was a cheat, or whatever the story
Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
then
but also if you had parents who were truly loving, you're more likely to have a loving relationship,
yes,
So it's the positive, I mean, it's
yes,
positive,
it's both.
you know.
It's
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
I even think sometimes people think, oh, I have this genetic condition. I'm not saying there aren't genetic conditions, but often it's an energy pattern. It's not
Mm.
necessarily genetic. Sometimes it is, but it's also, you know, I mean, people who have high blood pressure, whatever it is, it's because of a way you're running your energy.
Yes, and a belief that's passed down as well. Because your grandmother had whatever condition, then
Yeah.
your mother's got it, and then you'll get it, and so and you can really buy into that,
Yeah.
and it's just crazy. I mean, I remember many years ago when Tony
Yeah.
went to the doctor because he had some pain in his fingers, middle fingers, and the doctor said, and I think he was in his early 40s or something. The doctor said, "Oh, it's arthritis. It's your age. That's your age. You've got arthritis, and you just kind of have to live with it." So Tony came back and he was furious. He was it's like, I'm not buying into that. I haven't got arthritis, and I'm not going to, And I'm glad he had that recognition, because it would be so easy to just kind of fall in line with what the doctor's telling you and believe in it, and then, create that condition going forward. And he still doesn't have arthritis. So, but we can be brainwashed into believing that,
yeah, and then you're more likely to have arthritis.
Exactly.
The doctor said I have arthritis,
And then we live up to it, right? And
Yeah.
that's what happens.
Yeah.
And then we become a victim of it. And we identify with it and talk about it as my arthritis, as opposed, and that language is just very easy to just keep picking up and continuing with. And we don't realize what we're doing is we're kind of hypnotizing ourselves. And
this is, I think this is because, we grow up in a, the energy of our parents, and we literally gestate, right in the second chakra, the emotional body of our mother.
yes.
I mean,
Yeah. And all the generations of, conditioning that have been inherited, held on to, and all of that. So it really does, it takes courage to break free from all of that, right? It really does. And it's work. It's not so easy. But the good news is that when you actually start seeing that and recognizing that, then it becomes easier,
Yes. And it's well worth the effort. I mean, you're really regaining your freedom.
Yes.
Every layer that you dissolve, is like, your life expands every single time. I mean, every time I have an epiphany about, something I wasn't conscious of, it's like a miracle. And I mean, for me, and I can feel my whole life shift a little bit.
Yes. And that's really incredible. It's an incredible thing. But it can be quite subtle, but it has this really powerful impact on everything, right? It's just it's really expansive. So do you want to share a little bit about, is there anything new that you're working on, any new projects or any?
I wanted, before I even get into that, if we have a minute, I wanted to talk a little bit about distance healing, like how real it really is. Okay.
Yes.
Not to, but there's actually scientific studies. And I think people don't realize that. And so I just wanted to mention that, because I used to be a journalist. I still have that kind of, I don't need that proof anymore. But it does, I'm just going to mention, there was a study that was published in the late 90s, right when I was finishing my book, on distance healing and AIDS patients. And so nobody knew if they were in the control group or in the treatment group, because it was all by distance, and they never had a conversation with the healers or anything like that. And there are a few interesting things about this, okay? One is that at 3 months after, they did treatments for like, I don't know, 10 weeks, a certain amount of time a day. And then they looked at the results. And at 3 months, there was no difference between the control and the treatment group. At 6 months, there were statistically significant differences. Mood, number of times going to the hospital, number of serious illnesses, days sick, all of that, significant differences between the treatment and the control group. So I just wanted to mention that because, I've seen this, and I'm sure you have too, where you're working with somebody and it isn't like everything happens as soon as the shift happens, right? It takes time for life to catch up to your energy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And so I've had lots of people I've worked with. I worked with a doctor who was so sick for a while that they really couldn't work. Let's say relationship traumas and childhood traumas, it sort of came home to roost. And I would do these healings, and they were long distance, not that it matters. And um and and she would like be, I don't even know if this is really doing anything for me. I'm still so sick. Da, 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 da. And I said, I said, one day you're going to turn around and, you're going to be working again. You're going to feel good. You're going to be in a new relationship that's happy. And, you won't even realize how much has shifted. And that's exactly what happened. So she went on and on for like, I mean, at least a year or two, like saying, I don't know if this is working. And then her whole life blossomed, right? Because it takes time for everything. Also, it's like a little like a renovation. So, sometimes all the pieces have to come together before, you go forward. So I just
Yes.
wanted to mention that because that study, but there was something else about that study that was really significant. And that is, there was a gentleman, I interviewed him after my first book came out. I'm just going to show everyone. This is my original book. And if you're interested in science, this is the book. If you're not, don't read it. Okay. It has other things in it, but it also has science. But anyway, one of the guys who was in the treatment group said that he didn't think he was in the treatment group because he got really sick. He thought he was going to die. And this also can happen. You can have an intense, I hate to say it, but you can have an intensification of everything that's wrong before it releases, because it comes like you're taking out the garbage. That's when it smells, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then he had a turnaround and he suddenly realized everything was okay. And, he was really much happier and, everything was in his life was better and he got better physically. And, he made the point, like what happens here with people thinking positive things about me, sending me positive energy. He said, what happens if somebody's sending you negative energy? I mean, this was a gay man who'd experienced negative energies for being gay.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say this because, it's not just about being a distance healer. We're all affecting everyone else at every moment. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the piece that I think most of us forget. Like I don't mean to sound so whatever, but every thought we have about another person really goes to that person.
Yes.
I'm laughing because it's such an enormous thing I'm saying,
Yeah.
and so we want to be uplifting. Everyone can be a healer in their life.
Yes. Yeah. And it's easy to forget that and to think,
Yeah.
you don't have an impact.
Yeah.
Especially if let's say you have a relative or a friend who's really ill and you feel like, oh, they're struggling with a chronic condition. You can often feel like you can't do much, but that you can do plenty with respect to, holding the highest intention for them, sending them loving energy, visualizing positive outcomes and all of those things.
Yeah.
Even if they can't quite see that themselves, you can do that work.
Yeah. And it's helping them even if you can't perceive that. So I just wanted to, share that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
One of my students, this is an amazing story. One of my students, there was a girl who was kidnapped. And one of my students just felt a real connection to this girl. She didn't know her, young girl, minor, and she just kept visualizing that she was going to escape. And 9 days later, she escaped. I mean, she was like held captive, in this crazy, God knows what would have happened to her, but she managed to escape and save her life. And,
Yes.
it's amazing.
Yes. It does.
Yeah.
It makes a
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah.
And
So
being
anyway,
conscious of that.
so about projects, I don't know how much to say.
Well, as
Um,
much as you feel comfortable.
yeah. Well, I have I have a big project, and then I actually just started writing again this week after a very long hiatus.
Oh, no.
So yeah, so it'll take a while because my books tend to take a while. But it
Mhm.
is going to be about healing, obviously, and about relationships and the connection between the two.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And do you want to just share the books that you currently have? You got them there with you?
Yes. Okay, sure. Yeah, I do. I have them. So this one is my personal experience of my transition from being a journalist to being a healer. So like how does that happen? This is how it happens. And it's a page turner, if I do say so myself. It's a very fast read, people tell me. And
Yes.
um and that's just like I originally thought I was going to write like a trilogy, but anyway, there's just one of those books from the very beginning. And this is the book that made me a healer. And again, as I said, there's a lot of science. I'm looking to show you a picture. But what I'll just say is, there have been science experiments that show, people's heart rhythms coming into entrainment with each other, people's heart rhythms affecting other people's brain rhythms. Our energies are always affecting other people.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's in this book. Okay. And then this book, Yes, You Can Heal, is my most recent, and it is case studies and guided meditations and ways to think about what you're dealing with and how to heal yourself.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
And they're all available. I mean,
On
now.
Amazon and
Okay.
probably Barnes and Noble, online mostly. I mean, you can order it from your bookstore, but in
Wonderful.
today's world, why, I hate to say it, but
Yes.
you can just click a button.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the whole world has become less physically oriented. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's not
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. With everything.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just seeing the time. We're getting close to the time
Okay. Yeah.
to time to kind of wrap up. But before we go, excuse me, is there anything you want to share with the viewers that we didn't cover that,
Um, yeah, I just want to say that connecting to the light, connecting to your own self, there's just nothing more important or wonderful to do. There really isn't, so.
Yeah. Yes. Very good. And where can people find you?
Oh, DianeGoldner.com is the best way. My phone number's on there. A way to email me, and you can email me also at Diane@DianeGoldner.com. And
Nice. And you also have a YouTube channel, right? You just
oh yes,
started.
I just started. Thanks to your help. Yes, I have a bunch of videos I still need to upload, but I've just started my YouTube channel, and that's at, I guess, Diane Goldner or
Yeah.
Diane Goldner Healer. Yeah, my 11-year-old son is overseeing that. He's always checking to see how many subscribers, whether I have more subscribers than he has.
I'm sure he gives you tips and tricks, right?
Lots of tips and tricks.
Yeah, he gave me
Or
a
up to
few.
him, I wouldn't be doing anything about healing. I'd be doing something about stuffed animals or something.
Yes, or something. Yes, something wacky or something. The world through the eyes of an 11-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Diane, thank you so much for joining me again today. As always, been an absolute pleasure. I
Such
really
a
loved
pleasure.
every minute. Really, really fun. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This has been really great. As always, if you find that this episode has value, then please share. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. So that's all from me and from Diane today. Thank you so much. Take it easy, be well, and bye for now. Oops, oops.